A lot of interpersonal life turns on very small signals. Imagine that you are talking to someone and mid sentence their eyes drift, their hand moves to the phone, they scroll a little, they nod once in the moment. Your mind is already working faster than the situation itself. You are no longer just watching attention move away. You are asking what it means. Do they value this? Are they withdrawn? Is something wrong between you? A lot of interpersonal life gets interpreted through a frame that turns behavior into a statement. A person looks away, and that becomes distance. A person forgets to reply quickly, and that becomes neglect. A person apologizes before anything happened, and that becomes guilt or weakness, or a comment on the moral tone of the interaction. A lot of this goes wrong at the level of interpretation. We keep taking behaviors that are better explained as regulation and reading them as relational messages. Once those messages are misread, the relationship starts getting built on false inferences. Take the phone example. Someone drifts towards stimulation while you speak. One way to look at this is to ask, what does this say about me? Another way to go about this is to ask whether this person has an attentional pattern. That pattern may be about stimulation, restlessness, or habit. These explanations say far less about you than your first reaction usually assumes. Most interpersonal behaviors are learned regulatory patterns, not relational messages. Behavior can communicate. Communication simply does not explain every observed act by default. A regulatory pattern is a behavior that helps a person manage arousal, threat, or mental effort. It is something their system learned to do, sometimes early, sometimes repeatedly, sometimes so often that it now runs with almost no conscious effort. A person who apologizes early before you even react is a simple example. You say something slightly serious, before you finish, they are already saying sorry, sorry, sorry. Some people think that this means that they did something wrong. Another person could say that they're anxious. Another way to look at it could be that they're weak. Each of those readings arrive loaded. However, a cleaner way to look at it, at least in my opinion, is that this may be a threat management pattern. The apology arrives before the situation has even been interpreted. In this situation, the person may be trying to lower danger, reduce friction, may have very little to do with actual wrongdoing. Observed behavior can usually be sorted into three buckets: regulatory pattern, relational signal, structural constraint. In ordinary life, regulatory pattern means the behavior stabilizes the person. Relational signal means the behavior is shaped to communicate something to someone. And structural constraint means that the behavior reflects a limit in capacity, energy, or attention. So let's go back to the phone example. If the person checks the phone with everyone, checks the phone when alone, during quiet moments, the behavior belongs first to regulation. If the behavior changes sharply by audience, if they stay present with one person and disappears with another, the possibility of signaling increases. If that person is exhausted, stressed, or sleep deprived, structural constraint may explain more than either signal or regulation. The point I'm going towards is simple. Interpretation needs sorting before meaning. Many people skip that step and start with self-reference. What does this say about me? That is where moral language enters and starts distorting understanding. Because once behavior has been read as a message, the next move is often evaluation. They should care. This is disrespectful. A close person wouldn't do this. The scene at that point is no longer about a pattern. It is about worth. A person's glance towards the screen has been converted into an identity threat. That conversion happens fast. Observed behavior becomes moral verdict. Moral verdict becomes self-verdict. They were distracted becomes they do not care, which becomes I do not matter here. That chain appears everywhere, and it causes damage because each step adds something that was never present in the original event. The event itself may have been small. The interpretation makes it large. The moral layer makes it personal. The self layer makes it existential. This is why moral language towards the self is so invasive. It turns patterns into identity threats. It teaches the mind to treat coordination problems as evidence about worth. It teaches the mind to treat friction as revelation. Many things that need calibration get treated as judgment. This becomes even more consequential inside relationships. Once people are emotionally invested, they become more willing to interpret. The question stops being, what pattern is this? It becomes, what does this mean about us? For many people, that question creates distortion. A stronger question, in my view, is how these patterns coordinate over time. Relationships can be organized in at least two very different ways. One is meaning attribution. You keep asking what this act says about love, care, or importance. The other is constraint compatibility. You ask whether these two systems can actually live together without chronic strain. This is a different kind of intelligence. Now you are looking at rhythms. How much attention does each person need? How much silence can each person hold? How much reassurance does one person need for their system to stay settled? How much initiative does the other person actually have? How much friction shows up in general daily contact? And most importantly, how expensive is repair? Once you ask them, the moral fog starts to thin. You no longer need to decide who is bad, cold, and loving. You need to see structure. You need to sweep over the pattern pair is sustainable. This is one reason compatibility matters. Compatibility often gets discussed as preference, taste, chemistry, shared vibes. A large part of it is structural. One person needs direct attention when they speak. Another person has a deeply ingrained divided attention style. One person settles through regular contact. The other settles through autonomy and intermittent contact. The question is whether the system they create together settles into ease with manageable friction or produces chronic strain. That matters because it moves the relationship out of the courtroom and into system analysis. From there, we can see what closeness actually depends on. Because closeness is an emergent property, not a belief. And I do recognize that the phrase sounds more mysterious than it is, so let me explain. An emergent property is something that appears at the level of the whole system when certain interactions repeat in a particular pattern. So, first of all, it is not located inside one promise or one label. It appears when conditions keep producing it. So, just imagine two people who move together easily. They They do not need constant explanation. They do not need to spend every week repairing the same problem. Their bids for contact land often enough. Their silences do not immediately turn into threat. Their differences exist, yet the overall rhythm keeps settling rather than escalating. Repeated low-friction coordination over time produces something. That something is closeness. It is a property of the interaction pattern. This is why you cannot simply decide to have it. You can believe you're close. You can say you're close. That alone creates a story about closeness. The interaction pattern creates the thing itself. The difference becomes clearer if you compare two kinds of relationships. In one relationship, the couple constantly reassure each other. They explain a lot, they apologize a lot. They repair constantly. They say, I care about you, I love you, you matter to me. The daily interaction still keeps grinding. Misreading repeat. The same tension returns. The cost of contact stays high. In another relationship, there is less speech about care, less fear, less explicit reassurance. The coordination is easier. Contact feels easier. Repair is lighter. Misunderstandings do not spread over time. That second relationship often feels closer. This is why closeness emerges from sustainable coordination, not inferred care. Care still matters. The question concerns what kind of evidence care actually gives you. A lot of people do not rely on lived coordination to know care. They rely on inference. They look at the role, sacrifice, duty. They say, this person is family. This person provides. They stayed. So care must be there, right? Sometimes it is. Sometimes that inference is carrying far more weight than the interaction itself. Traditional family structures become quite revealing here. A lot of traditional families are organized less around sustainable coordination and more around morally assumed care. The logic is familiar. You are family, so care is given. You are parent and child, so love is established. You are married, so devotion is presumed. From there, once care is presumed, misalignment gets tolerated. Once misalignment gets tolerated, the burden shifts on to interpretation. Do not focus on how it feels, focus on what they meant. Do not focus on the repeated pattern, focus on the sacrifice. Do not focus on the chronic friction, focus on their duty. That structure can hold families together for a long time. And can also produce a strange kind of emotional confusion. People keep saying they love each other, and they may fully believe it. The daily system is still full of tension, avoidance, and unspoken resentment. In those systems, care is often inferred through obligation rather than experienced through coordination. The care may be real, the role is carrying more than the rhythm can support. Moral commitment is doing the work that sustainable interaction never learned to do. This is why role-based systems can feel powerful and painful at the same time. The people involved may genuinely care, and yet the system may still fail to generate closeness. That distinction is hard for many people because they were taught to equate care with closeness, duty with safety, endurance with love. A person can feel bounded to you morally and yet still be very hard to live with. A parent can sacrifice and still be frightening. A spouse can stay and still be unreachable. A sibling can feel loyalty and still create chronic instability. These are coordination problems. Once you notice that, a lot of the old confusion starts to reorganize. You stop asking, did he care? And instead, you start asking, what did the system actually generate? Did it generate ease? Did it generate contact? Did it generate safety? A lot of us were trained to live by interpretation, to scan behavior for verdict, convert friction into a self story, to use role as proof of care, sacrifice as proof of love. And each of those can be real. Each can also mask structural failure. A person can say all the right things and still behave poorly. Family can hold a powerful moral script, yet still generate a weak everyday bond. A relationship can contain genuine concern and still run on constant strain. So the task becomes different. Observe behavior, sort it properly, ask whether it is a regulation, signal, or constraint. Watch what moral language does to the scene. Notice when pattern turns into verdict. Notice when that verdict turns into self-threat. Then ask the harder question. What kind of system does this relationship actually form over time? What is easy here? What is expensive? What repairs? Or what repeats? And that leads to the final question. If closeness emerges from repeated coordination, and care can be morally assumed without producing it, then what exactly have most people been taught to protect when they say they want love?